Hare Krishna, dear devotees. As some of you likely have seen, there's a lot of pain in the Sangha that I'm part of at the moment. I want to share my take on things. Now I've had a chance to listen to all points of view and facts of the situation regarding Srila Tripurari Maharaja's public rejection of Padmanabha Maharaj as a disciple. I have no desire to demonize or attack anyone, but rather present the truth as I see it, given the facts. I realize many will make instant judgments as to my motivation, and so be it. First, it's worth mentioning that, like many of you, I have deep affection for Padmanabha Maharaj, who I will refer to as Maharaj, as that's how I've known him. I like to think he will attest to that, given our relationship. I've known Maharaj for 3 or 4 years, listened to every single one of his recorded lectures in that time, worked on 2 promotional videos for his book, supported him financially in many ways, including taking the hit for his recent cancelled trip to the UK, where we also hosted him last year, arranging programs. He's been a teacher for me, even though I'm conscious, having listened to many classes of my own guru, much of what he shares is coming from Srila Tripurari Maharaj. That's what particularly inspired me about him, as well as many other undeniably nice qualities he has. My reasoning for mentioning all these things is to make the point that this video, it really is coming from a place of love and desire for truth. It's not about demonizing or even a fanatical or passionate desire to defend my guru. You know, I know that can come. But I've had my own previous guru traumas, like Maharaj, so I'm not afraid of looking at all things as objectively as possible. I care very much for him, as anyone who knows me personally knows, and I hope that will come through even amongst the pain I feel. I realize I may be a stranger for many of you. I serve harmoniously with many other sanghas in Brighton, so feel free, for example, to write to ISKCON Brighton leaders if anyone would like to confirm the nature of my character and conduct in relation to dealing with other devotees, wherever other faults I may have. I should also note that I'm a disciple of Srila Tripurari Maharaj, and although he is my Guru Maharaj, I intend to refer to him as Swami Tripurari, again to hopefully emphasize the fact that the purpose of this video is not some blind desire to defend my Guru. Rather, it's a desire to give an opportunity for another perspective to be heard from someone who is sincerely inquired from both parties. I've read the entirety of Maharaj's document scrutinizingly, asking many different devotees involved their personal experiences, treating it like detective work for both my own needs and grieving, but also hopefully to help others who find it all a bit overwhelming given the sheer amount of information. This is the most difficult video I've ever had to make, but yet also I feel it's the most necessary. I feel very comfortable in what I'm sharing today. I've not been asked to do it by anyone. It does come from my own inspiration, in the hope, as distant as that might seem right now, but in the hope to see some kind of reconciliation between 2 individuals that I care very deeply for. I have no desire to go back and forth in useless argument, nor do I think it would be beneficial to go through 56 pages, point by point. Life is too short. But I do want to share my honest analysis, all things considered, and also clear up some unfortunate misconceptions around this situation that are out there. My prayer is this will reach all those who are most affected by the situation and help them in their healing, including Maharaj himself. Of course, this is an extremely complex situation. My heart goes out to Maharaj, as I know it's been a rough ride in many ways. But at the same time, there are some very simple aspects of it to me that are glaring and have helped form my stance after looking at all the facts available. After deep prayer, these are the things Krishna has chosen to highlight to me. It's clear to me that not everything is reflected accurately in Maharaj's public presentation, and especially how things climaxed. Although he presents his presentation as detailing facts, there's a lot of his own subjective commentary, selective emphasis, and not all of it is truthful, whether by intent or not. Further, there are many things that are selectively left out. That's partly why I feel it's important to balance out some things. Again, hopefully not in a challenging way, but also a plea or a letter in some ways to the heart of Maharaj. It's clear to me there isn't full integrity in the pages he shared. I'll start with what I think is one of the major factors as to why Swami Tripurari rejected Maharaj publicly, or at least would justify making it public in my eyes, seeing as many people feel that was not correct. And then I want to look at a few key things that stood out to me through the whole situation that leads me to feel as I do. This isn't to cast blame, but just specific things have shaped my view. When I try to treat it all as objectively and sympathetically as I am able to amidst the sadness of it all. So in his original Facebook post, sharing his document, Maharaj writes, I had originally planned to share this document after making a short post in the private group of Sri Chaitanya Sangha Facebook, but since my post was twice deleted and I was removed from the group, and then Swami Tripurari made his post public, I then have no other option but to share my story in that same manner. Maharaj wanted to share a message where those in need of knowing his reasons for taking distance from the Sangha could contact him privately. However, at this point, as he says in the Facebook post, he had intention to share this document, a document it turns out that he had already been circulating. It's not a small group. It contains nearly 500 members. I understand the desire to want to share one's story, but it should also be respected that that group is ultimately headed by Swami Tripurari, who at that time had instructed Maharaj to take distance from the situation. I don't want to make assumptions about Maharaj's motivation, but it does feel a little political and an attempt to undermine the faith of devotees in their guru, who have various adhikar, and especially now knowing the contents of the document and how some things are commented on. This is while, at least in name, Maharaj was a disciple of Swami Tripurari. So let's assume it really was a desire to share his story, though. The moderators representing Swami Tripurari clearly felt it was not something that would serve the purpose of that group. To add to this, Maharaj had been asked to go to Argentina. Maharaj didn't reply to his guru, not even with yes, I will take space, or no, I disagree. Then 4 days later, tried what to me seems like a political move, especially as the intent was to share the document with disciples and followers of Swami Tripurari with no communication with him. What came next is what was most disturbing to me personally. Rather than accept that maybe that wasn't the place for his post, and instead even post something similar on his personal wall, which I anticipate those who have an interest in Maharaj from our Sangha would see anyway, he took a threatening and demanding tone, saying, I've tried to share my story there as to keep this whole thing still somewhat private. If you want, you can make me a member of the group again and allow my publication to be there and devotees from the Sangha to express their feelings and situation. If you prefer not to do so, then against my original will, I will have to post that same thing in my public Facebook profile and other social media, all of which will make the whole thing known for thousands, which I don't think you want. At least that's not what I want, and that's why I originally made the post in the Sri Chaitanya Sangha Facebook group. You choose. So, even without the supposed guru-disciple dynamic that was in place, and I appreciate Maharaj was having trouble with that at the time, to threaten isn't the right response, especially when there are other options that would be less public and disturb less devotees. It's a dishonest approach in itself, even on a secular level, before we even bring guru and disciple dynamics into the mix. If I go into someone's private Facebook group where they set the tone and tell the person who heads it that if they don't let me post in any way I wish, I'm going to post their personal correspondence and my own interpretation on those things for the world to see, that would be so dishonest. Now add the dynamic of guru-disciple, which was meant to be in place, at least by the way Maharaj portrays things, even if there were some difficulties he was dealing with inside. Why make demands instead of humbly taking distance as he had actually been requested? Especially when you're not the person setting the lead of that particular group. Can you imagine someone threatening Srila Prabhupada, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Gaur Govinda Maharaj, Srila Narayan Maharaj like that, with that kind of tone? Would that have got him very far? Sure, many may feel it's playing the guru card, but could it be the case, in terms of the mood expressed towards Swami Tripurari's decision to not allow a post, the guru has a point? It feels to me like a narrative is being painted as if the rejection is because Swami Tripurari is not dealing with the situation to Maharaj's particular satisfaction. Yet combined with other points that I'll share shortly, it came to such a place where a threatening tone, seeming like blackmail to my estimation, is being used. Now, I can't speak to Maharaj's inner intentions, but all things considered, that's how it comes across to me. I also don't agree there was no other choice. There were many other choices. I'm not sure what the PDF was necessary for. If someone chooses to contact you, let them, and share that right now you're feeling some crisis of faith or whatever you feel is worth sharing, and a level of detail according to the relationship you have with them. Why is it a necessity that every single person needs to know that level of detail? Again, I can't know your internal life, but it comes across like a need to preserve a certain image to the extent that the shraddha of others in their guru is not considered. Aside from that, it could just have been given time and space. I sympathize with having doubts and wish you would have taken some real space as you said you were going to do, and most people knew you were going to be doing also who were aware of the situation. Those that didn't and were concerned if you went quiet would no doubt contact you if they wanted to know more, or like I say, post on your personal wall, "I'm having some space." Allow whoever wanted to, inspired by Krishna in the heart, to contact you. You could have reached out to those you have a closer personal relationship with if you sincerely did not want to disturb anyone's faith. Having now read the whole document, seeing the nature of the post and then the resulting threat, surely you can see to me why it seems like a political move to garner support for your own position. I'd like to be wrong, but it's how it comes across. If you've had so much doubt, why not leave gracefully? The will of the Vaishnav leading the Sangha was clear, and your choice was certainly not representative of a disciple. What is a guru meant to do in such a case, especially when your plan is to make it public anyway if you can't get your way in this particular situation? Whatever your views on it are, and how things got to where they did, which I appreciate are complex, to me this part of the story really requires an apology. It didn't need to go the way it did. I think it's dishonest to say you had no other option. Don't worry about your following, and even if you truly feel you wanted those close to you to know the details in the document, there are probably very few who needed to, and why not have a conversation with them personally? Our path is to try and understand Krishna, not all the complexities of an incident in your life, depending on the intimacy of the relationship we have with you. Often you paint a picture like it's for the devotees, but it seems to me it was for you. If I'm wrong, forgive me, but all things considered, it leads me to think otherwise. Given the nature of the message, which is from someone supposedly taking the disciple role, threatening the guru, it seems a strong statement needed to be made, even without all the background that goes into this, which I'll touch on shortly. Threatening that you're going to make something public, then painting a narrative that you're only making this public because you were publicly rejected, missing the details that led to that, seems off to me. Most people are not going to have the time, energy, or interest to read 56 pages of your document. And so, although I considered sharing these thoughts with you personally and privately, I felt the need to make this public just to show there is more to the situation from your side that pushed it in this direction. Also, related to this, the original post of yours was at 3 a.m. your time, a time when you knew the moderators would be sleeping. Sure, maybe you were up extra early, but given everything else, it seems to me like you knew the message would not be approved by Swami Tripurari, and instead of respectfully let that be and just post on your private wall that you were taking space, it led to a threatening demand. You have to remember, you are not the head of that Sangha. You don't set the rules of engagement in that group. Why do you feel it was so necessary unless you feel like a victim here? It's a lot of pages and a lot of your own defensive commentary. I understand you feel pain. I get that. but be honest about it. Then Bhakti Ras tried posting it again and again through different accounts, meaning you didn't respect the desire of Swami Tripurari. Even if you have no faith at that point, though you seem to portray you did have something, and Bhakti Ras herself says to me she's still serving Swami Tripurari in so many ways, and so identifies as a disciple, I presume. Why are you repeatedly attempting to go against the very clearly expressed will of the person leading things? It's just disrespectful, even without the guru-disciple dynamic, which of course makes it worse. Knowing the contents would affect the shraddha or faith of so many, especially in the way you have narrated certain aspects of the situation. Why would you threaten to make it a public thing unless for personal retribution? I hope that will serve in helping to see that maybe it was warranted. Making threats to a person you say is your guru, how can they be considered a disciple? It's just lip service. And actually, being unattached to his reputation, Swami Tripurari, not ignorant of how the response would be perceived, I'm sure, held on to the spiritual principle involved. Of course, there's a lot of background that goes into what led to this unfortunate situation. I really think it would be a waste of time to go through each and everything because, frankly, the damage is done, and this is mainly for those who already know a lot of those details. But I just want to show things that stand out to me as to why I think the crux of the problems are 1, different perceptions of the same situations, but more importantly, 2, pratishta or pride, and again, not to demonize, but there are some clear indications. Although there's a whole background with Sundar Gopal that Maharaj lays out, and I will also comment on shortly, the more public internal issues mainly came from Bhakti Rasa's response to Vrindaranya's articles. At that time, I personally saw no problem with the articles. In fairness, I also didn't see any problem with Maharaj's response to Sundar Gopal at the time. But that's a point. Much of this is subjective. I appreciate some did feel there was a problem, but naturally, the most important opinion would be what one's guru thinks. And if the disciple finds an issue, then why not present that to the guru first, before opening public personal gripes? Because essentially that's what happened with your approval. I'm not sure why you wouldn't have responded to Bhakti Ras with, let's check with Guru Maharaj first, see what he thinks. And of course, she has a responsibility in that Swami Tripurari had made clear he didn't want her post to be made public. I've seen the texts between the two. He specifically said, I don't think it is in the best interest of all concerned to air such sentiments publicly, so I will call and we can discuss at length. Swami Tripurari had explicitly expressed that he did not want those discussions on a personal level in public. He even tried calling her, which for whatever reason she ignored, which I appreciate is between Bhakti Ras and Swami Tripurari, but arguably Maharaj had some role in it. At the very least, the articles were sent to you, Maharaj, and you chose to pass them on to Bhakti Ras without consulting Swami Tripurari, knowing her affection for you, and by the tone of her messages, which as you know I have seen, seemingly not much affection for Vrindaranya. Maybe it was completely innocent, but again, with the whole context, I can't help but have that doubt. What's done is done, but my main point here is maybe that it should be acknowledged that there was some role in making a mistake there. I appreciate you feel you had agreed with the content, but still it seems strange not to seek the approval first. You feel you shouldn't have stepped in regarding Bhakti Ras when she asked you if it's okay to post. I disagree. The article itself didn't seem to contain problems through my lens at the time. Going through your points, I can't help but feel that maybe you were overly sensitive to some things expressed, and that's okay, that's human. But maybe that should have been brought up with Swami Tripurari or Vrindaranya in private. I bring up one example because your points are too vast, just to try to share why I think that maybe they were being interpreted in the wrong way. I remember on the Nam Ras show, you made a point that just because Jiva Goswami cites Shankaracharya, it doesn't mean he agrees with him in every respect. Now, regarding the comment on Shankaracharya in relation to yourself, just because on a philosophical level The point of only taking one argument or emphasizing one part of an argument is compared to Shankaracharya. Whether you agree or not philosophically that that is what you are doing, then why not get into the harmonist comments and clarify there? But instead it was taken as a personal dig, even though many like myself didn't see that to be the case. So I can't help but feel from the get-go you felt some push of the ego. That's human. Many of the complaints of the original article are subjective. I don't see why Vrindaranya should have to lengthen her document with more history. You are free to do that in the comments if you see fit. I also don't see why it was essential she mentioned Swami Tripurari's stance. This is a subjective opinion and not one that everyone shares, of course. But so making out like these points misrepresent you make me feel like maybe you are more concerned with how you are perceived than other things. Sure, it's an opinion from my lens, having looked over all these things exhaustively, just as you interpret Swami Tripurari's words in a certain lens, which hopefully you have the honesty to acknowledge you could be mistaken on. Now, even in your article, to go through and nitpick about every section certainly seems like you were more sensitive than you cared to admit. And maybe your guru saw a bigger picture in that happening within you. I get it, I do. I'd hate to be on that public platform. But you opened up for Vaishnav debate on the Nam Ras program. Why be so touchy about it if you feel your articles about Sundar Gopal are also fine? And the reason I bring these things up, again, is the point is that I feel more is going on underneath it all. You feel like it was for the concern of the devotees' feelings about it, not your own feeling personally hurt. But you didn't have much concern for the devotees' feelings in your letter and how you tried to force it becoming public. You don't seem to be willing to accept any possibility that you could be wrong about Vrindaranya's articles, which many like myself didn't see a problem with. Yet even before knowing Swami Tripurari had explicitly requested the gripes not be aired publicly, I didn't see a problem with the articles, but I did see a problem with the tone of Bhakti Rasa's post and definitely did not think it was the appropriate place. Why the necessity to post it straight away? Could some time not have been given? Where was the advice of a well-wisher on giving it some time until there had been a chance to speak with Swami Tripurari? Was there a pressing need to defend one's honour? Were the devotees all of a sudden going to fall down from their practice because they felt that you had been slighted? There was no immediate or rushed need. So considering all things, maybe it would have been wise to advise her to wait until you could air your concerns with Swami Tripurari, knowing well such a strong political tone is going to cause some heavy discussion. I don't think you are that ignorant, Maharaj, given all your learning and social experience. I find it hard to believe you didn't think that with such a tone there would be outburst and passionate discussion with devotees of different adhikars and different personal sentiments. Also, a mistake was made in sharing the article initially with Bhakti Ras. Maybe it was an innocent mistake, but if my guru sends me an unpublished article, you can be sure I'm going to ask him before I share it with anyone else. For that matter, I would do it with any person, be it a friend or a colleague sending it to me. I can't see your inner motivations for doing so, but maybe it's worth acknowledging that it was a mistake that had been made in your relationship with Swami Tripurari and the trust he had in you before anything blew up. It may seem small to you, given all the things that came after, but to me it is quite significant, given your responses to other later situations, including the one I already mentioned regarding the rejection. Especially given we see the results that came by it becoming a public affair. It's not censorship or suppressing free speech. I disagree with that. It's trying to be sensitive to the fact that human emotions are difficult as they are, what to speak when they're broadcast for the world to see. Facebook becomes a wrestling Royal Rumble. Then it blew up, of course, and feelings were hurt. I think the next difficulty comes in you wanted it solved in a certain way. Swami Tripurari felt it should be solved in a different way, and that was continuously argued about. Okay, you disagree with how it should be dealt with, and you were given a lot of time to be heard by different devotees, but you also have to accept you can't impose your will on the person ultimately leading things. You were heard, but the overall analysis was disagreed with. I think you were missing the etiquette between guru and disciple. A lot of importance was being put on yourself, but ignoring the wider community. And while I appreciate some felt your solution correct, not everyone did, myself included. I wholeheartedly think every aspect of the personal side of things should not have been dealt with publicly on a group of nearly 500 people. At the very least, surely you can respect that I differ on my opinion with you on that matter, even if you don't agree. But doesn't the person who sets the tone of a private group get ultimate say? What to speak of being the guru? Any gripes or disturbances other individuals, aside from yourself, have with the situation and how it went should surely be brought up personally and privately with a guru themselves. Given how things transpired, I can't help but feel you were using the feelings of others to seek what you perceived as justice for yourself. There may have been misunderstandings about each other's intentions with words used between Vrindaranya and Maharaj at the heated time. But that is between them as adults to resolve, or at least take some respectful distance from each other. And I think Maharaj needs to acknowledge it is possible he also may have looked into some things wrongly. I think it's also important to note that in Swami Tripurari's responses, he didn't give full support to Vrindaranya in terms of every single minute thing that she said in that Facebook thread, which is how it's being perceived, but rather in terms of her defending herself on a public thread attacking her that should never have been there in the first place. I think the next big mistake was trying to be Swami Tripurari's guru. I've listened to him for over 10 years, so not much difference to Maharaj, and I never got the impression from him that Maharaj did in the way one expresses difference of opinion to their guru. There's a place for that, but there's also a tone and a submissiveness. Even from your own classes on guru, they do not reflect the tone you often approached your guru with on this quite small issue in the grander scheme of things. You have often quoted Pariprashna, but conveniently leave out the submissive aspect to that in your definitions. I think that is telling when looking at these things all as a whole. I think that issue was more pressing to solve for a senior representative of the mission than a squabble that shouldn't have taken place in the first place. It's not to dismiss Maharaj's and others' feelings on things, but it's risky to instruct the guru on how other disciples should be dealt with. Maharaj said his guru was lacking a certain experience to deal with this situation, the perception of the Sangha members of all this situation, and the potential effect of that perspective on their relationship with Guru Maharaj properly, and that in the name of overemphasizing the philosophy as being paramount, we may end up not dealing with other issues that require our attention. Maybe through Maharaj's lens, that was what was paramount, but as Maharaj his later threatening tone revealed, maybe, just maybe, Swami Tripurari was seeing something else that needed to be dealt with first, and each individual, if they felt issues, could of course at that point approach their guru with those issues and seek his opinion and advice, of course in a proper mood, not an instructing or demanding one. I totally appreciate that the situation is very different, but just imagine if when Srila Prabhupada kicked the 4 sannyasis out of ISKCON after claiming he was Krishna, if a disciple starts to come to Prabhupada and say, "No, you're doing this wrong. Wouldn't it be better you bring them close to you? Explain the situation and philosophy gently that you are not God," and so on. "You're reacting wrong to kick them out, Prabhupada." It probably wouldn't be a good idea. But Prabhupada acted as he saw fit, and indeed the long-term results were right. They became exceptional devotees due to their sincerity and surrender, even while being kicked out. To question how the Acharya decides to run their mission, especially as a disciple, doesn't seem to me to represent the proper mood, especially when, as we will see more, the person who actually needed to learn some lessons was Maharaj. To me, The relationship between Vrindaranya and Maharaj was a separate issue. The real issue was Maharaj's relationship with Swami Tripurari and the dynamics there. Without that in place, what is the use of other things? Would you criticize the way Srila Prabhupada chose to deal with different devotees at different times, sometimes soft, sometimes like a thunderbolt? At the time, I couldn't understand the tone of Vrindaranya's responses to your initial PDF response, though in retrospect, given what has transpired, I have more understanding. But I don't know her, as you expressed you don't. I don't know her relationship with her guru, and how her guru decides to deal with her privately. And that is his choice, just as he tried to deal with issues he perceives in you privately and gently as much as possible over the month before your attitude became worse and started affecting other people's relationship with him. Do you not trust the guru sees these things in us? If not, it seems the doubts were there a lot earlier than this situation. That is okay to have doubts, but maybe they should have been expressed a lot earlier. After all, I remember you making this Facebook post last Kartik. Today I am leaving the Dham one more time, but wanted to share some brief words of appreciation towards our Guru Maharaj. During these past 3 months, I've had the great fortune to meet, hear from, and receive different blessings from many extraordinary sadhus, inspired Vaishnavas, extremely learned pandits, and deeply absorbed and detached bhajananandis, each of them addressing their life and sadhana in their own unique but totally bona fide ways. But I must tell you something, hopefully in proper Vaishnav spirit and respect to the subjective feelings of each student toward their respective teachers. The jewel that we have found, or that has found us, in the form of our Guru Maharaj, is not to be found anywhere else. The dynamic vision, free spirit, contemporary presentation, deep siddhanta, empowered humility, poetic rasika sensibilities, and compassionate approach, just to mention a few, all of them combined together in such an extraordinary embodied figure, is something we should pay close attention to and never underestimate and forget. To keep ourselves reminded of such a gift will naturally increase our gratitude towards such a gift, as well as a passionate desire to reciprocate with our whole lives. Needless to say, there is absolutely place for each disciple to feel something similar in connection to their own respective guru. But as far as my case goes, and while being grateful for all that I have received from so many sadhus, I pray to forever remain especially indebted unto the most holy lotus feet of such a personality, Srila Guru Maharaj. Now, I like to think you weren't just making a public show in that post, that you genuinely felt those things. But then why keep pressing something if you have trust that he is going to be compassionate for your best needs in the whole situation as well as everyone else's? Why press that it has to be solved in a particular way that you deem right? Was there no trust that he has a bigger picture on things? It doesn't mean blind following, but also recognizing we don't see everything. But as you expressed to me, having trust needs to be there. Certainly not getting argumentative over something small in the larger picture. I can't help but feel your ego was pinched, and you need some justification for how things went down, especially when eventually you started undermining the faith of others by giving way too much information, dangerous ground to tread on unless there was a serious breach of misconduct in Swami Tripurari that compromised his spiritual standing. I don't see that to be the case in this instance. Why do you feel a right to try and demand a certain outcome? You know, at least theoretically, better than most people, that it's not about justice, but mercy. And maybe, just maybe, Swami Tripurari was looking to show mercy, but maybe not in the way you had hoped. No one is saying be a blind, fearful follower of dogma, but there is still some decorum with the Guru. Anyway, moving on to some other points that stand out to me that add to my feeling that you have lacked integrity in your approach in all of this. You write the following. As I had suggested to Guru Maharaj, on September 16th, approximately 25 devotees from the Sangha, those who privately had expressed some doubts and concerns about this issue, participated in a Zoom call with Brigupad Prabhu as a moderator. It is untrue that all of these 25 devotees had privately expressed doubts or concerns. I never had done, and I was one of them. I was happy to be part of them, no doubt, and it was nice to hear the perspectives, especially from some of the more mature members of our Sangha. Even after the second call, I expressed as much to Bhakti Rasa, where she had expressed she had appreciated Swami Tripurari's kind and compassionate response to the mistake she had made in disregarding his instructions in the original post. Swami Tripurari had even encouraged the open forum for discussion there, as he wanted to hear concerns. But I personally had not expressed doubts or concerns with anyone, or even personal feelings with anyone but Mohini at the time. So this is an untrue statement to try and paint a certain picture. Further, I assume I was probably not the only one like that, but let's say for the sake of argument, all 25 expressed doubts. There are 493 members in that Facebook group, so that is 5%, hardly the majority of devotees, yet it's being made out like so many members of the Sangha were disturbed. I appreciate some were, and I empathize, but not all. Again, these things could easily have been dealt with on an individual basis. Given the various levels of faith in the group, the only reason I think a public statement would have been absolutely necessary would be to protect your own image. Especially as some people would have been oblivious to the nature of the initial dispute if they didn't read it before it sank into the depths of Facebook obscurity. They would have just heard the point Swami Tripurari decided to emphasize on the call, presuming they listened to that. Then there is the mistrust and dishonesty of recording the conversation with Brigupad. You tried to downplay it as ignorance of academic standards, and maybe that was the case. But given what has come later, especially the sharing of public emails, or rather private emails, and the threat to try to get things exactly as you wanted it, I'm not sure why you decided to share those audio recordings with other people. That certainly adds to my feeling some integrity is lacking in all of this. So many conversations were had, and you feel you were passed around. But having dealt in a managerial capacity, when someone is just not getting something, they belabor points over and over. It becomes exhausting. We see with this PDF, most things aren't relevant. People have other services and responsibilities. They aren't as invested in these dramas as you may think. So if the main point, that your attitude in approaching your guru is incorrect, is missed, and over you are focusing on secondary issues, it's no surprise you are being passed around. I get it in some ways. I often get lost in making every detail known, as I'm sure this video shows. But the reality is, it really isn't. There are simple principles. And again, in regards to the original article, not everyone perceived that situation in the same way you did, and as painful as it might have felt with what came after, ultimately, it's not your call to make as to how it should be dealt with. Swami Tripurari changed his mind on the public statement to praise you, and I can now see why. It would have been easy to quell the disturbance caused by all of this, make the statement, and move on, allowing you to feel like you were right in every aspect of the situation. But upon reflection, it is really upholding the principle that first needed to be established, which of course is what led to this disturbance, the dynamic between the disciple and the guru. Trying to deal with your pride in it all so it would not manifest into a worse situation. I feel if anything, in changing his mind, he was being biased toward you, by making dealing with your problems the priority at the risk of confusing so many other devotees who are in support of you. Couldn't it be that Swami Tripurari realized it would not be healthy for you to make such a declaration at this time? He gently tried to work with you, and sometimes things were cooler, and then you would let it eat you again. It's a shame, and time has shown he was right in his estimation, given your later threat. Another thing not accurate, and that brings your integrity into question for me, is when your situation is compared to your experience with Sundar Gopal, which you often try to downplay. One thing is you say only a small section of his followers were disturbed with your presentation. This just isn't true. I experienced and witnessed online many devotees disturbed from a variety of sanghas, including some locally. Whatever the reasons for disturbance are, others were disturbed by your approach, whatever your motivations may have been. You can't dismiss others' feelings and expect only your feelings are to be acknowledged, and that's what seems to be happening. Further from this, there's an important omission in your document worth sharing in the story. Some of Swami Tripurari's disciples in Costa Rica have a close relationship with Sundar Gopal. Being friends, they offered an opportunity to mediate between the two of you, given the relationship had been hurt. You refused. Whatever your reasons for someone emphasizing the importance of interrelations, a need for dialogue and resolution, this is weird to me that you refused. The opportunity could have been there to fix those relations in person, but you refused. Do you see any parallel anywhere? It weakens your position. Further, to omit this detail from your document again paints a certain picture of that saga that actually isn't the whole picture. So please forgive me for feeling like it is a desire for preservation of a certain image of oneself. It makes me wonder how much else has been conveniently left out. I understand doubts, especially given our previous experiences with guru figures. But especially having heard your tone in your final audio message, which I will share with anyone who requests it, as you have said I can't help but feel you kept missing the main point in terms of how one is dealing with one's guru. We see it getting progressively worse, leaving no room to get to the root of the issue beyond what you and others saw as injustices. Coming back at every little thing, but you did this, Guru Maharaj, you did that. No question of, why did you do this in this way, Guru Maharaj? And why was it different in my doing it this way, Guru Maharaj? In a submissive mood, it just seems more and more challenging. And what is the meaning of guru and disciple when it gets to that point? As I mentioned in all my hearing about Guru Tattva, even the relative side of things from Swami Tripurari, I've never come to the conclusions that you have, that it is appropriate to challenge in the spirit that you did. If you don't at all consider yourself a disciple in that moment, that's another thing. But then why keep with the facade? Again, it's not to downplay doubts, but at the same time, there are better ways to approach things if you truly feel you are still a disciple in that moment. To me, it sounds like someone arguing with their guru. I don't sense any humility in that conversation beyond the words you use. Maybe I don't have the adhikar to see the higher humility and purpose or intention in it, but if that's Maharaja's estimation, I would say it might be worth reflecting whether it could be possible he's in the same situation with what his former guru was saying and expressing in substance, beyond form. I'll share the audio with anyone who requests it, which of course is shared with permission, and allow others to judge for themselves. Is it the proper mood of a disciple? Could it be asked in a different way? It's not to downplay your doubts, but the attitude in trying to clear them is incorrect in my eyes. In my years of listening to Swami Tripurari, I've never had that impression from him that this is the proper way to interact with one's guru, even when one wants to humbly suggest something alternative. The interactions between guru and disciple, as I have heard Maharaj in many of his own classes express, seem to go against his own principles. To inquire exhaustively doesn't really fit the bill here, especially when leaving the submissive part out of the equation. I think if someone spoke like this to some other acharyas I mentioned, they would have been blasted actually. And I truly feel if someone else had been in Maharaj's position and he was advising them, knowing how he speaks on guru etiquette, he would have encouraged them to express doubts humbly and be prepared to hear the answer and give it time if necessary. Instead, it became an argument. Recently, we had a conversation ourselves, Maharaj, and you felt the tone was off, which upon reflection, I agree with you, coming from my own pain, from a situation that I feel could have been avoided. But for sure, my tone was off, and I can understand why you felt disinclined to engage with me, given the mood I had, although you kindly did when I explained myself and adjusted my attitude. Maybe it's worth reflecting on your conversations with Swami Tripurari with some distance, review them, listen to the audio, not with a mentality of wanting to win or be right. Don't you think the tone could have been off in those exchanges that may make one less inclined to engage with you in the way that you are particularly demanding? In my own dealings with individuals who unfortunately are creating a disturbance in the community, sometimes they just give an overload of information to try to justify why their truth should be the accepted one, and they kind of miss the main point as to the disturbance. So we have to try all sorts of ways to bring it back to it. It's not a wanting to gaslight or shut them up, but it's just they miss the point of the disturbance to others that they are creating, instead of taking some time out, engaging in their sadhana, and be welcomed back with open arms. Then on top of that, to undermine other people's faith in Swami Tripurari because you want to be right about a situation that maybe you're not in all aspects, even when they themselves were ready to move on, it seemed, such as Archana Siddhi. I think you can understand why I feel more is going on here under the hood. You feel the original public post, which was against Swami Tripurari's explicit desire, was right because it brought out some of Vrindaranya's feelings towards you, even though your guru at the time disagrees it was right to be posted. I think Swami Tripurari's sometimes confusing response was right because it has brought out so many of the qualities within yourself that maybe need to be addressed and were more subtle until this point, especially the political threat at the end that contributed to your public rejection as a disciple. Now, I understand that you felt yourself at that point you could not move on, but I think there could have been many better ways to handle it than the argumentative spirit, and instead taking some time away from the situation fully. You over and over tried to say you're being impartial in it all, but you clearly took a lot of things personally, or you could have just shrugged them off. Just seeing some of your responses, even if you can't admit to yourself, very much shows a person on the defensive, trying to justify their behavior. Something that jumped out at me, where you totally missed the point, and there are quite a few of these, is when you say, regarding one's standing being determined by how one relates only with one's superiors, I would respectfully differ. Rupa Goswami, as well as the Bhagavat, clearly depicts how important it is that we learn how to relate with every devotee, be he, she, a junior, peer, or superior, even a non-devotee, even an envious person. I know you know better than this. It sounds like you're grasping at straws, which is disappointing, knowing you as I do. It is true, we have to learn to relate with every living entity. But just as we don't approach a tiger and a human the same, similarly we don't approach a junior devotee and a senior devotee the same. Again, to miss the point being made that your attitude and your approach toward the senior devotee in this case was not proper. I would hope you would not consider yourself senior in that relationship. But the response just signifies this argumentative and defensive attitude. I understand, again, the pain of the situation, but you have to acknowledge that in a proper way. This misinterpreting the Shastra to fit the narrative you want to be right leads me to doubt the honest motivation in many other areas of your PDF discussion. I can't help but feel it just becomes the mind and the ego trying to find anything and everything to argue in defense of oneself. I get it. I've been in that situation where I feel hard done by or misunderstood. But it seems disingenuous to make out like you're not hurt by the points about oneself and only the truth is presented. Also, I think it was a mistake not to have that final call with Swami Tripurari. You may have wanted a different approach, but your guru had a different desire. And it seems to have been a pressing matter, given that it pushed you to use threatening language. You probably should have at least attempted the conversation, if adamant you wanted to resolve things and not just have the outcome in the only way you saw fit. I don't really feel a need to comment too much on using words like swallow it, etc., because frankly, If you study Prabhupada's interaction with some disciples, he could be heavier. That doesn't take away one's spiritual standing, so I'm not sure why you are including those kind of things in the document. Having studied the history, conversations and letters of Srila Prabhupada quite extensively over the years, many instances he could be quite bewildering in how he dealt with certain things. Do you question Srila Prabhupada's spiritual standing? Whether you admit explicitly or not to have no problem affecting the faith of others in their guru by highlighting certain things he said with your own narrative, it seems you're missing the main point over and over, the underlying issue. Then you want to make out like you lost faith because you couldn't get the answers you need. But hearing your attitude and approach in these conversations, I'm not sure the faith was as deep as you outwardly portrayed in the first place. Again, not a problem. It's something we're all growing in. But the problem is there when you start to try to paint other narratives that creates doubt in other disciples, to ignore the issues you may need to deal with directly. Is it answers you need or answers that you want? If you're unable to surrender, step back, slow down, engage in sadhana. After all, there's no need to be attached to the position. If it really is that bad, find other guidance. To make your demands on how the guru should run their sangha is clearly a problem. One of the most disturbing and telling things you write that puts a lot of other things in context in what is underlying it is when you say, as unfaithful as our messages to Guru Maharaj may seem to be, I, Bhakti Ras, Archana Siddhi, Pranada and Sumati, as well as others not included in this document so as not to make it even longer, are trying to serve Guru Maharaj and develop a proper, progressive faith, even if that takes the form of disobeying him or disagreeing with him on this particular subject. Indeed, it requires much more humility and surrender to disagree with one's guru from a genuine place and present in that context uncomfortable truths in the spirit of service, rather than just to say yes to everything and basically lose one's individuality. Although there's a place for disagreeing with one's guru in a proper spirit, which I discussed earlier, I think to use that to justify one's actions that clearly are going against their guru's explicit wishes is disingenuous. It's making up one's own philosophy. Was threatening the guru also done with more humility and surrender? Again, I sympathize. I really do. That's clearly not a good space to be in. But I hope having it pointed out may help in seeing where maybe you could have been wrong in some areas of this situation, even if others made some mistakes in other places. So much of this seems to reflect on the problems of everyone else in the situation, but with an emphasis on diverting from one's own problems and mistakes. That's a dangerous place to be, and look where it has led. In my own relationship, I have never felt I should just say yes to everything, nor do I feel I've lost my individuality. But I like to think that if I need to say no to something, I would do so in the proper mood. I have so many other points that I noted when going through the document where there are misconceptions, or at least misinterpretations of different events in my estimation. But to be honest, like many of you, I'm tired with this saga. I want to move on. I was looking for truth and was disappointed so much was left out of Maharaja's document to paint a certain picture. I've touched on what I feel are most important. Look into it and believe things as you choose. I would request, as a well-wisher, Maharaj reflect on the things I have shared. Could there be any substance to it at all, given how exhaustively I have tried to look at these things? To hear your side took a number of days alone. I've tried to be as objective as possible so I wouldn't be swayed by sentiment, especially as I have sentiment for both you and Swami Tripurari. But actually, reading your document itself deepened my conviction that you have made many mistakes in this particular episode that you're trying to distract from, whether intentionally or unconsciously. It's very sad to see. Pratishta can lead one to put oneself on an equal level with one's guru, or even feeling that one has surpassed their guru. Dangerously, it can lead one to go directly against your guru, especially when it is threatened. I can't claim to know your inner world, Maharaj, but too many pieces of this puzzle make me think that this is what has happened, especially with the culmination of the threat at the end. You can say that's just my opinion on it, but the same can be said for how you have interpreted some of the events in your document. A lot of your analysis of Swami Tripurari dismisses his own feelings on things, yet there is an emphasis on how your feelings are being dismissed. Why is your value system more important than your guru's? Wouldn't it have been better to take some distance before such drastic actions that disturb the faith of others, even if you felt you needed to take shelter elsewhere ultimately? This is how the situation reads to me, even just reading your document, what to speak of the other details I've learned in my investigation, if you will. It doesn't mean I don't sympathize with your pain or some of the plights in the details. But still, some major principles were missed. Swami Tripurari tried to keep things as private as possible for you while you dealt with these issues, and you brought more devotees into it, even trying to transfer their faith in him to faith in you by disturbing their faith. I can't say whether your initial responses to Bhakti Ras were with bad intention. We all make mistakes, but we also have to own up to them, especially in front of our teachers. The damage is already done in a big way, and many won't take the time to watch this, having already formed an opinion without the facts. Ultimately, people will make their own minds up, and unfortunately, many have only been given one perspective. I just needed to share my story in this as I navigate the different points of view. I'm concerned for you, Maharaj. Before the public rejection, this document was already there, and you tried to frame it as if it is Guru Seva, while directly going against the expressed desire of your Guru. It seems like a twisting of the philosophy, and we've all seen where that goes many, many times. You say you are following what Swami Tripurari has been teaching for the past 15 years, but in truth, you're following your own understanding of what has been taught. As I say, I've listened for over 10 years, and I haven't come to the same conclusions. Now, when you're being told directly what he wants, you're deferring to your own understanding of the Shiksha over Swami Tripurari's direct words. You feel you can't go on serving Swami Tripurari. So be it. Many of us have had a different experience of him as someone who does listen to doubts and is compassionate. I believe that was your experience, given your previous declarations, unless there was also dishonesty in those too. So clearly, there may have been more that was trying to be shown to you. And as an outside observer, that's quite clear to me. Especially because, as far as I can see, there hasn't really been any problem in his conduct beyond the way you and some others personally feel he should have dealt with a squabble amongst God siblings that shouldn't have been as public as it was in the first place. Then, you kept missing the point that you shouldn't try to impose your own frame of reference on your guru, and unfortunately, it spiraled to the sadness that we all experience today. I can't imagine being in your position through it all. It's painful. I pray that you will do some serious internal reflection and give it some time in light of what I've shared. And if I'm right, do the needful. For all your great qualities, you're not infallible to being clouded by pride. In fact, it can make it harder to detect. I think your need to be right on every single point has made you blinded to the main point, unfortunately. And many of the situations surrounding this just were not your call to make. You were trying to be the guru in how it should be dealt with for the benefit of all. Hopefully, you'll respect where I'm coming from, given what I've presented, and that it doesn't come from wanting to demonize you or create a false picture of you, as I've heard you and others suggest may be happening. I would want no part in that kind of thing. If I'm wrong in my estimation of the situation, may time reveal that to be so, and I pray that I deal with it appropriately. And if there is any substance in what I say, I pray for Maharaj being able to see and respond appropriately, even though it may seem harder and harder with the gravity of the situation. If you think there is any truth in the way I perceive the whole situation, I pray you can find it in your heart to ask for forgiveness for your actions where you may not have acted appropriately, knowingly or unknowingly, even if you still feel your faith is taking you elsewhere. If you don't think the threatening tone that led to this becoming public needs to be apologized for, I can't help but feel you are deluded, as much as it pains me to say it. If there's any substance to what I'm saying, I know you know the devastating effects of Vaishnava aparad that can come on slowly, subtly, and gradually. I know if anyone can come through this, it is Maharaj, no matter how embarrassing and public it may have been and become in some ways. I know deep down he's pursuing truth and spiritual ideals. And there are so many instances of great devotees being covered and tested in extremely heavy ways, coming through it to properly recalibrate their angle of vision and priorities. This is my hope and prayer for Maharaj in the situation as I see it. Don't let your own mind become your guru. Some are calling for you to remove your sannyas position. Some feel you should keep it. Personally, I don't care. You decide according to your own desires. But I do think that it would speak volumes that if you disagree with me, that you are letting Pratishta affect you. If you were to humbly take the position of a brahmachari, serving somewhere quietly in the background until you find a guru that you have confidence in and can take sannyas vows with again. There's not too much difference between brahmachari and sannyas. Don't continue taking advantage of the facilities and respect the sannyas ashram offers until you find Guru. Krishna will no doubt send you that if he is indeed guiding you in all this. But ultimately, that's not much of my concern. Just take it as a friend's observation as to what might be healthiest in the immediate moment, given the nature and gravity of what has transpired. You mentioned many times in your discussions with Swami Tripurari that for you to resolve things, you need to not just move forward from the situation, but through it. I would ask Maharaj, please reflect. Is it possible that maybe, just maybe, you're looking through the wrong door? Some watching this may want to rush out now and demonize Maharaj because of his lack of integrity that I have pointed out. I plead you don't do that. It is so sensitive, and everyone is hurting very much. Be his well-wisher and encourage him to see things from another perspective and address the situation in the way that is characteristic of the type of Vaishnav I know he is underneath all these unfortunate issues. I need to close this chapter now, but I felt another voice needed to be heard. I totally get that having seen abuses of gurus in history, it may be hard to digest some of the events that happened, or especially for those resistant to the guru principle in our postmodern times. But to my eyes, there was a higher spiritual principle being established here, and Maharaj missed it. It may be that Maharaj wants to come, break down with a point-by-point rebuttal everything I've said, but that would be disappointing. Personally, I don't have any more time or energy for this. 56 pages was enough. I'm confident in my conviction, and I share my analysis here for those who are interested. Let everyone decide on their own. I'd hope he may reflect on the words that I've shared today for some time and then act as he feels is appropriate. I'd hope that it would be with right intention. For anyone I've hurt with my words, please forgive me. Please forgive me if I've spoken too harshly or out of place in this video. It comes from a well-wishing spirit. I truly wish Maharaj all the best in wherever his decisions take him. Please know this is just my attempt to help someone that I love dearly. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you.